back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. All of our intelligent conversations are now wise conversations. And this one's going to be a fun one because, I think about wise markets a lot because I talk about it on the show all the time. And I got my card here, but more than that, when I get hungry. So on Monday night, my wife's not here. So I'm doing all my shopping. I'm doing portion control and all this. And I got some ice cream, and I walked in the kitchen and I realized, and this is the worst part, it's really foolish of me, the second night in a row that I'm without cones. So when you run out of cones around here, it's a real problem. I got to get back to Wise. We're promoting fruits and the good stuff and produce. So I actually, I show my ice cream and I show my pizza from Pizza John's. I show my crabs and my crab cakes on the tour. I never show pictures of me eating the really healthy stuff. So I'm going to do that right now. Dennis Curtin is here from Wise Markets to talk all things berries and fruits and produce. Dennis, I promote a lot of good junk food, good healthy American things. We're doing crab cakes here. I like them fried. So, I'm not the health food nut, but I begin every day of my life with fresh berries, mostly organic. And I even throw a banana in for good measure here. So when you're preaching berries, you're talking to the right guy. How are things at Wise?
Things are going very well at Wise. And just so you know, bananas are the top selling item in every supermarket in America.
What's the number on it? 4011, right? That's a number you have to put in.
Yeah,
No, it is.
That's the peak. Yeah, if you do the self checkout, yes.
I had to learn those because I get them all the time. So when you remember the number, you don't have to go to the B and put in banana, right? For that.
Right. And as part of our low price produce program, if you buy 2 pounds of bananas, you get 39 cents a pound, which is a smoking hot price. I'd love to say that bananas are local to our markets. They're local in the sense that we sell them, but sadly they're not grown in Pennsylvania or Maryland or any of the other states.
People ask me about that because my wife and I have always been big farmers market shoppers, and
Mhm.
we are, local's everything I do, right? It's everything I've
Sure.
ever done. And taking care of local people. Give me the Wise philosophy, because I literally don't know. I do know signs say local, and I can tell when I'm looking at produce, especially heirlooms and different stuff that you bring in, organic stuff, that it's probably grown down the street, but I don't know. So give me a little primer on what you guys do produce wise, because bananas don't grow on the Eastern Shore, sadly.
Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, local. We started in 1912, and it was two young guys, entrepreneurs. They opened a local grocery store, and they were completely different then. You'd go to the counter, and they would take your order, and then they'd go pick your order. It was no self-serve. And in those days, they were buying local produce. I mean, it was just a natural thing to do. And fast forward to today, we work with about 150 local farmers. The majority of them are in Pennsylvania, good representation in Maryland. But in the other 5 states where we have stores, we are plugging into local farmers. And maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was talking to this meat guy, and he was starting a local beef program. And he said, local is going to be the new organic. And I looked at him and said, what do you mean? And he goes, when you put organic on something, that sort of connotates quality. And he said the next sort of connotation for quality is going to be local. And fast forward to today, you go to a restaurant, somebody tells you where your food came from, the local farm. And we've been doing it all these years, and we just sort of looked at each other and said, hey, we should talk about this more often.
Let's brag about it a little bit, right? I mean, where these peaches come from. I mean, if you Google me and peaches, the pictures show, I am a peach guy. I love peach bread, peach cake, peaches. I know it's around the corner. It's my favorite time of the year. And I talk about food all the time. And I guess as a young person, I grew up in Dundalk. My mom grew up in the South. My dad grew up in the North. Right? My dad was from Scranton. My mom was from South Carolina. So the things that wound up on our table, my dad, stood in soup lines during the Depression in 1929. My father was much older. So like what we ate, my dad was just happy to have food. He would always say that. You got $1, put some food in your belly, And I guess as I've gotten older, I'm 52 now, sometime into my 20s and certainly into my 30s, I started to really taste food. Where it's like a tomato is a tomato is a tomato, lettuce is lettuce is lettuce. And I probably hadn't eaten anything other than iceberg lettuce the first 25 years of my life, maybe a Caesar, mixed in some romaine. I got all exotic. I find food over the last 15 or 20 years, and I'm doing this crab cake tour, and people are like, why are you doing crab cakes every day for a month? I'm like, because every one of them will be different. Every single one will taste completely different. And I start to feel that way about fruits and vegetables and things I eat, that I love variety in what I do. But you mentioned organic. My wife is a two-time cancer survivor, right? So
Hmm.
organic means a lot, especially like on porous fruits and vegetables that have more outside than, let's say, a potato that can be skinned or a banana that's self-contained.
Hmm.
So we've learned about all this. When you say organic, the one thing I know, when you say organic and local, organic doesn't have like the shelf life to live a long time. So local and organic kind of fits its own model in that it's grown there, it's sold here, and it goes into your belly right away. But
Right.
there is something about when you're shipping stuff from further away, it doesn't take on the local. You can taste the difference in the summer of fresh corn than something that's been frozen. And maybe when I was a kid, I didn't know that.
Right. There's a lot of things at work here. First off, we have a increasing number of organic suppliers in every part of our store, not just produce, but we have some local produce suppliers. Every 2 years we do a dinner honoring our local farmers, and it's one of the fun events because you sit
I
there and
bet you eat well.
yeah, we do. It's sort of like, stuffed chicken and beef. But when you sit there and, the connotation of a farmer is sometimes, well, they're a lot of things, but maybe they're not bright or sophisticated. If you're a farmer today and you're making a go of it, you're bright and sophisticated, and you're enormously hardworking. Our corn guy tells me about getting up at 4 a.m. and harvesting his corn and being done by 7 o'clock with the harvesting part. So these guys work phenomenally hard. We do have some organic suppliers. One is in Newport, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour from where I sit. Um, and it's an increasingly important segment for our customers. We sell more and more local produce. For years, we would stock local produce and we wouldn't sell it. And our competitors as well. But in the last 5 or 6 years, organic has resonated with customers, not
Truly,
just
the word would be demand, right? There's a
right.
demand for it.
The demand is there. It has surged in the last 5, 10 years, and that's one of the things that it's a trend. We love our local produce. We do a great job with local produce. But you mentioned peaches. We have a new relationship with a bunch of Georgia peach growers.
Let's go. I'm
Family
ready.
farms, and we're really excited about it. The pricing's good, the quality's good, and it's sort of a group of farms in Georgia that have band together to promote to get it out there. And one of the things that makes freshness easier to do, more convenient, is that logistics. I mean, it's harvested and then it is in our warehouse within 24 hours. And then within less than that, it is out on shelves. Now, is it the same thing as picking it off the tree? The answer is no. But the way they handle things, the way they preserve it, you were talking about corn. And like when I was a little kid, and by the way, I grew up in Scranton too. When I was a little kid,
Clark Summit, my dad, born in music.
okay, Greenridge, and my family lives in Clark Summit right now.
Wow, Clark Summit. I got
Yeah.
family in Clark Summit. Wow. It's a small state.
No, I mean it's
But you were
and
talking corn. Give me your corn
yeah.
story.
So,
Because I mean, Silver Queen corn for me, when I'm on the Eastern Shore and I'm doing this tour, like the roadside stands, picking up corn, just a tradition. Going back to when I was a teenager chasing girls at the beach in Ocean City, we'd always stop on the way home and get corn. You have to.
I thought they were chasing you.
Well, it worked the other way back in the 80s, I mean, now
God,
it's the other
yeah,
way
yeah.
around. It's because I have strawberries like this, that I promote on Mother's Day.
There is nothing like local corn. The corn that's at the stand or the corn that we sell that is, locally grown, it's fabulous. But like the story about corn in general is that the corn that comes from Florida in the winter, they do a great job at handling it. So once when we were kids, you wouldn't touch that corn because you'd eat it and you go like, this isn't good. Today, what happens is that corn is harvested. They immediately put it in a building that sucks out all the heat, and it's also a container, and they ship it north. So that corn's freshness, and also they've tweaked with the varieties. So the corn you get in the winter is way, way better than it was when we were kids.
I'm
Now,
glad you told me that because there's it's a level of trust, right? It's like the Billy
right,
Joel song. It's a matter of trust, right? Like you see it in December and you're like, it would taste good at Christmas on it. But you know what I do? I get a can of Mitchell's white shoe peg, right? And I roll that instead of trying fresh corn in the winter is what same thing with maybe even green beans and different things that I think on an annual basis now, I think everybody that shops and sees produce sees that we've sort of figured out some science behind making
right.
things taste good, making it healthy, doing all of that, and getting it to stores. I mean, there's huge industry in this, but your industry's been rocked in the last 15 months. I mean, you've been at this a long time. I was going to give your background. You've been with the company since I've been doing radio. I'm going on
Right.
30 years now. And I would think the last 18 months is unlike anything. And
Oh,
listen, I know people complain about prices, and we're all getting that with gas, and we're getting that with everything. But we've just lived through something that you mentioned. My dad grew up in Scranton, and the Depression, and polio, and all those things that
right.
my parents who were born in 1919 told me about. We've now had this experience, and I think all of us, the first experience all of us had was our supermarket, right? Like that was the first place we had to go last
Absolutely.
March, last April, that we buttoned up, gloved up, did all of those things that you guys were so on the front line. And I think it brought me and Rob together and Jamie with our relationship a little bit because you had a real story to tell last year about heroes on your front lines. But more than that, how difficult things are with trucks and food and
Oh, yeah.
all of that in every sector where everyone walked into a supermarket and saw the run on toilet paper, the run on chicken wings, or the run on flour, the run on. My wife was looking for red cooking wine. There was none, no red cook. Everybody
I
was
didn't.
cooking with red wine, I think.
I and this is no secret. We sell beer and wine in other states, and we saw a surge in sales. We were fortunate. A couple of things. First off, you're right. The last 14 months have been unlike anything anybody has ever seen in the food industry, and that's not just specific to Wise Markets. That's for every supermarket and food retailer in the country. It was astonishing the things that we saw. All of a sudden, everything closed at once. Uh, Restaurants, and you say, okay, big deal. That's a big deal. But it's also schools where kids were getting meals. It's also office buildings, where people were going out to lunch, and it all overnight came to supermarkets. And it was a challenge. We had some advantages in this fight, in the sense that we have a meat plant, and it's a meat plant that everything arrives in the box, not the hoof. Let me emphasize that. But what happens is, when there were shortages, when plants were closing because of COVID, and out in the West, beef and poultry especially, what we could do is we could go to the food service channel, that were supplying restaurants, and all of a sudden they didn't have a market for the product. So we could buy it, and we could break it down in our meat plant, and package it so it's ready for consumers. Because, like, when you buy for a restaurant, you're not buying individual packets of chicken. You're buying, like, huge loads of chicken or beef. We could break it down and ship it to stores. So we had those advantages. We had clever buyers. I mean, they were buying paper products from Turkey. I mean, and some of it, like, it flew off the shelf. Some of it we had too much, but in the end, we did a really good job staying in stock. And at the same time, you have to protect employees, associates, as we call them. We thought, we worked as best we can. We invested millions of dollars in terms of extra pay, and thanking our associates. But I mean, it was
Well, you
tough.
were the first ones to put the plastic up because you were the first ones where we had to go, once a week, every 10 days. They were telling us not to go out too often and load up when you did.
Right.
I followed all those guidelines back in April and May and coming into your stores. I have pictures of me and Rob out in front of the place because he had toilet paper and nobody else had it down. It was the only roll of toilet paper. I had to go to the
Yeah.
county to get toilet paper.
Yeah. And like, think about it. I mean, we have close to 200 stores, and all of a sudden getting out and putting all those panels up at every cash register, at the deli and stuff. I mean, the people I work with, I mean, I'm talking about it and I'm claiming credit for my company, but I mean, it's their story, it's their accomplishment. I mean, we saw astonishing things. I mean, and Rob made a good point when I was talking to him a couple months ago. He said, you have a big staff, you have a lot of people you work with at a supermarket, well over 100 employees, associates. And he'd say, you'd look at people and say, like, I don't know what this person's about. And he said, a year later, you're like, Shazam, that person did a great job. It rose to unexpected heights. And that's what food retail has done. That's what my company has done. And we're proud of it. And we'll pivot again as things begin to open up. I think in the long term, our stores, Wise Markets, have done a good job at sort of being there for customers when they need it the most. And we think that's going to, be good for our business, good for our associates.
Well, I dig the relationship. It's been a long time for me, working with supermarkets where I've been 30 years on the air.
Sure.
You are local enough, certainly, to want the kind of relationship we have to tell a story about signature crab cakes this summer and all of that. But more than that, telling these stories about like Paws for Pets. And I had Tim on, who winds up not being a bad guy, even though he went to Patapsco and not the Dundalk. I mean, we had to work through that, different recipes on both sides of Merritt Boulevard. But my dad, and I know I've shared this before in some of these conversations. My dad, Nestor Senior, Nestor
Mhm.
Aparicio, not my father from Scranton who raised me, but came to this country from Venezuela and worked at Pantry Pride, and at
Sure.
Mars, which now is
Yeah.
Wise on the east side where I'm from. My father's job in America was he was the night store manager for all the stock. And when I
Right.
was a boy, it was the Pantry Pride up in Lutherville when I was a kid. And everybody in in the audience here remembers Pantry Pride. If you're of a certain age,
Mhm.
certainly would remember Mars. You guys have been in my life because I lived in Perry Hall, and there were
Sure.
Wise near me, but I didn't know of any other Wise stores. I knew you were in Pennsylvania because I travel enough, and I've been up
Sure.
15,
Oh,
past
yeah.
Bucknell and
Yeah.
up toward Montoursville and all that through the
Wow.
years. But you guys have really grown during your. I mean, how many stores when you started with the company, Dennis?
About 160, 163, and we're now at 197. And so, I mean,
Baltimore
that's.
has been such a growth place for you. I
Oh,
mean, you're
yeah.
on every corner here now. I mean, don't tell Rob this, and you'll see it if you guys check the numbers on my card here. But I shop at the Maiden Choice one more because it's closer and it's in Catonsville. But I've gotten to know a bunch of your stores, and many of them look like they weren't Wise a million years ago, like the Mars that I'm familiar with in East
Right.
Baltimore that everybody here grew up with. And even my Heritage Fair in Dundalk was an event that you guys have taken over.
Yes. Number one, when Mars was exiting the business, we purchased a number of their stores. We have a ton of their alumni. Uh, they know
Tim
the
was one
market.
of them, by the way, when talking to him.
Yes, and they've helped us learn the market. And also, our number two guy in the company is a Baltimore raised and born and raised in Baltimore. I think he lives in Towson now. I mean, he lives up here too, but um, there was we bought a bunch of Food Lions. So right now in Baltimore County alone, we have about 12 stores, probably regionally, maybe 18, perhaps 20.
Well,
And
I did look because I'm doing this tour. I'm doing 30
okay,
ballparks in 30 days. And my wife and I drove to Nags Head last year when things thawed out and we could get
sure,
away and just really get away. And I went down to Waldorf and I saw a Wise like way down in southern Maryland. And I
yes,
started looking. So I Google mapped this because I got to let you in on this. This is our little corporate meeting. Dennis Curtin joining us here from Wise. So I'm doing 30 ballparks in 30 days. I'll get you
okay,
the pitch deck on it. I just finished it. But we're doing this in August, and I've been told, and the one of the parts of this is Chesapeake Bay and local Maryland crab. We couldn't get pickers on the Eastern Shore, many of them Venezuelan of my
sure,
lineage. Couldn't get into the country last year. It's a complete skill set that is not something picking crabs on the Eastern Shore, blue
hmm
crabs that are they also have in the Bay of Maracaibo in Venezuela. So this became an issue for several of my sponsors last year with crabs, crab cakes, all of this. So this summer we're doing a True Blue campaign for real Maryland crab, and I was really heartened when I was out at the Fullerton store. I think you
sure,
call it Nottingham, but it's in Fullerton, where you had real, Maryland. And I talked to Tim about this with seafood, Maryland crab meat. I'm being told by certain people that when I get west of like Frederick, I'm going to have a hard time finding a restaurant that really serves Maryland crab because Maryland crab it costs more. It's a boutique item. It's local. It's harvested locally. It costs more to produce than stuff that comes in a can from Indonesia or whatever. So I would say this, I might be looking at those stores in the west part of the state, which I've seen in Frostburg, and I'm like, that might be my salvation to have Maryland crab meat that I cook when I glamp out fishing in the Savage River and doing these crazy things I'm going to do. So I have looked. You guys there's a lot of locations for Wise that I didn't know where you were, you know?
And it's funny. What happened is we acquired and converted in 38 stores in about 3 months. And then you think, oh, what's the big deal?
Wow.
That's a huge deal. I mean, we just had this rolling camp of associates that would go from region to region to convert stores from Food Lions and to help train the associates who were coming over from Food Lion. And what we did, what my group did, is that every week we would have a welcome to the company event where a couple people would get up. We'd give out some prizes. We'd give out some goodie bags, and so I was all over that place. So yeah, we're in places, Eastern Maryland. We have a store in Rehoboth. That was a good event. Uh, Cumberland and Frostburg, I was really impressed with. I didn't quite realize that was Maryland. It felt like such an Appalachia kind of.
I want you to tell me about it because Dennis, this is the God's honest truth. One of the reasons I've been all over the world, right? I mean,
Right.
I travel. I love to travel. I can't wait to get my passport going. I even got my global status for the first time in my life. Where I get the fast pass, But I'm between now and then. I want to really see Maryland in a different way. Like I said, I've been up and down 50. I remember going across those bridges before they were built, and the bypass in Salisbury, going to Ocean City. I've been doing that my whole life. I didn't know that Oxford, Maryland existed until my pal Mark Miller from Blondell Miller Schuler told me. He's like, you got to go to Oxford, man. And then my friend is from Crisfield, her family. She
Okay.
has been telling me about Crisfield since 1979 when I met her in 7th grade. I've never been to Crisfield.
I have
I've
not
never
either.
been to Smith Island for Smith Island cake. So I'm doing all of these things. So I've never been to Cumberland. I've never been to Frostburg, although I did have some friends go out there and fail out. I've never been to Deep Creek Lake. I've never been to Oakland. I've never been fly fishing, glamping, Western Maryland camping. I have whitewater rafted. I'm not doing it. So this trip is about doing things I've never done. So if you have any Cumberland or like Frostburg, other than me visiting the Wise, which I'm going to have to do apparently to get crab meat out there, because I'm not going to find any crabs out in this Savage River.
What I liked about Cumberland is number one, it's a town with its economic challenges, but it's in the mountains. You could also tell that at one point there were a fair number of Irish immigrants there, and I'm of Irish descent, and so you could see that in some of the older churches and streets and things like that. Um, the one thing I noticed is that it's beginning to turn itself into sort of a place where you can come and use it as a hub to go hiking or biking, and it because the landscape is striking. Frostburg, I was there at the school. The university, they have a downtown theater that we use that's beautiful. But I mean, we grew up. The Weis Markets sprung up in the small towns of Pennsylvania and Maryland, and to lesser degree New York. And after all these years, I've been to all these, little towns that you don't read about in the travel magazines or the travel sections of big newspapers, but they're just beautiful, quirky little places that you could go hiking or biking. Another great town, it's a completely different area, is Wellsboro, PA, home of the Pennsylvania Grand Canyon. Now that's a good description, but it's also, well, it's not quite the Grand Canyon, but it's a beautiful place and it's a cool little town.
Look, I know you're pitching me in on Pennsylvania. That's all good.
Yeah,
You went to school in Maryland, didn't you?
I did. I went to Mount St. Mary's.
See, I want to point that out that you had to
Yeah.
export, or import education. I'd say, listen, I'm doing Maryland this year. I'll do Pennsylvania next year. Okay. We'll
Okay.
figure out, I'll come up there and find out what would I eat in Pennsylvania that would be like a crab is to Maryland. That's the cool part about, like, I even put the crab in the logo, right? Like, and I'm not a guy beating on my chest wearing the Maryland flag and doing all that, but Maryland's pretty cool. Like the more I look at
Oh
it,
yeah.
think about the tributary and the water, how much waterfront. We were a Jeopardy answer like 2 months ago. My wife and I are big Jeopardy fans, and the question was like, what state has the most waterfront? And I'm like, that might be us. Like it might be us because of the way it is, and
Really? You
it's
beat
us.
California?
We got a lot of waterfront. It may have said east of the Mississippi. It may have said,
Okay.
it may have been tricky like that. But it was about water and waterfront, and we were the answer. And I sort of guessed it, but then I like looked at the map, and I'm like,
Yeah, it makes
wow,
sense. And St. Michael's. I mean, I've been there, and that I was at St. Michael's long ago before it was cool, and it's a beautiful craggy little town where, I mean, you can go in and you can find, cute little restaurants, but you could also just chill and be at the beach, be on the shore. So, yeah, but Maryland's a great state.
I'll be shopping at your stores all over the state using my card. If I turn it over, everybody will have my number and they'll try to use my rewards card. So I don't want to do that.
Or
Dennis, it's been a
redeem your
pleasure to
rewards.
visit with you. You got any Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania, any sports trash talk you want to throw at me, or you okay?
I'm kind of neutral about that. I do note that we're a sponsor of Penn State, as we are a sponsor at the University of Maryland for their athletics, and they're both fine programs. Getting back to your one question, things that sort of Pennsylvania take a lot of pride in terms of food. Well, there's always the cheesesteaks. Pierogies are another one. And of course, pizza, especially in my neck of the woods in Scranton, where, you know, fights break out and when we argue about pizza.
Scranton's known for pizza, really?
Oh yeah,
I literally didn't know that. What should I do?
go to
Where
Old
should I go?
Forge.
Give me a place.
Go to Old Forge. Go to Rivallo's in Old Forge, which is right outside of Scranton. Google Old Forge Pizza, and you will see that it's a pizza destination.
See, like my dad, my grandfather passed away in the early 70s. So we always had to drive to Scranton to do like legal stuff when I was a little
Ooh.
boy, like 5, 6, 7, 8. So all my memories are just this long drive, up there. But about 20 years ago, because it was before I was married, Rush played in Montage up on the mountain,
Mhm.
and I went
Sure.
up and I did like a day and a half, but this was like pre-Google. So I didn't have anybody I can call and say, I ate at a chain restaurant, like,
Right.
up on the hill, So next time I'm going that way, because clearly I'm exploring all of a sudden. My wife spent 3 weeks now. She's from New Hampshire.
Sure.
She's been hiking all through New Hampshire. She's doing Vermont this weekend. Wait till I tell her what you told me about Cumberland, because she knows Western Maryland's beautiful, but we've always like we hit the split and we go to Breezewood because we're always going to Pittsburgh for football games. I mean, she's had more pee breaks in Breezewood over 18 years of our marriage because she goes to the Steelers game every year, but we've never kept going in Maryland.
What
So, like going out there and seeing it and hiking, my wife's going to fall in love with it. I think that's what's going to happen when this is.
Whatever you do with Breezewood, don't go there the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, because that is like everybody is going home, and it between the Pennsylvania Turnpike and Breeze, it's like the biggest traffic jam in the world.
All these Pittsburgh people talking pierogies. My wife is Polish, so every Christmas Eve we get pierogies. So comparing
Yeah.
pierogies will be my summer of 23 tour. Right now, I'm going to stick to crab cakes. I'm thinking oysters next year.
One of the big producers of pierogies is Mrs. T's, and they're based in Schuylkill County, Pottsville, which is right above Harrisburg, but it's the coal country.
And you stock those, yeah?
Oh yeah.
All
And by
right.
the way, even though I just promoted Old Forge Pizza, let me just say this: we make really good pizza at our stores. We make it to order. It's a great deal. I believe it's $5.99 for a plain tray of pizza, and we don't take any shortcuts. And when you eat it, you go like, "Hey, this is good pizza," and that's something that you don't usually find in supermarkets.
Well, I mean, Rob's been bragging on the signature crab cake, and I haven't had it yet. Full disclosure, and the reason for that is, Dennis, I'm about to eat a crab cake every Friday for the rest of my life. I
Yeah,
will. I
I'm
promise
there.
you, the
I'm there.
signature crab cake will be involved in my tour here this summer, as will some fresh Maryland crab meat. Dennis Curtin joining us here from Weis Markets, spokesperson, PR, friend, produce person. Now that I can go eat this strawberry. This isn't fake. It's not plastic. I want to
I
let
know.
everybody know. That's a real thing. Got at Weis Markets. Thank you for coming on and
Great to
having
be
fun
with
with
you,
me.
Nestor. This was fun.
Blueberries are next. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net. AM 1570. 39 cents a pound. Get the reward card. Bananas.
Got to get 2 pounds.
4411. And we never stop talking. Baltimore, positive and good food and fun.